Hello. Today we are going to see if we can recreate a kick. Let's have a listen to what we're trying to create. This is just a basic kick, which is now in audio. Let's have a listen. So nothing special there at all. Let's try and recreate that in Kick2. Let's open it up. And then we have a init patch here with nothing going on in the amp or pitch curves. Before we start though, I think it's important to discuss the elements of the kick. We have two components. We have the pitch envelope and we have the amp. So essentially all a kick is a sine wave that goes from a very high frequency, in this case it's 12,500, all the way down to 55 hertz over a very short period of time. Here, in this case, it's 110 milliseconds. In addition to the pitch envelope, there is an amp curve. So this is the velocity of that 110 seconds over time. So it starts high and it goes down to 0. And you can see that in this curve here. So it starts high all the way down to silence at the end. Now that we know we have two elements, this is what we need to recreate. The first step, therefore, is to analyze the original kick. So we'll go back up to the kick itself and we'll put on an oscilloscope. And let's have a look. So we can see here the curve, it starts off, it's very hard to see, but I'll fix that in a minute. There's a strong attack or transient, then it dips down, it goes slightly up and then down to silence at that end of the 100 milliseconds or however long the kick is. As I said, this transient is very hard to see because it's up against the X or up against the Y axis here. So to fix that, very simple trick. Just move the kick on 1/16. Move the loop range on also. Go back to oscilloscope. And there you go. It's no longer up against the Y. So we can see a bit clearer now. There is the transient, very, very short transient. Drops all the way down and then back up again. I personally find the amplitude curve easier to do first. So let's have a look at replicating that. Here we have our Kick2 instance. If we play it back, they'll play back at the same time and sound horrible. So let's mute this one. We'll go into another oscilloscope and we can see that they're both overlaid on top of each other. So good start. Now we just need to start crafting this kick. So first of all, what I like to do is move the pitch all the way up so it's inaudible. So 20k, I doubt very much whether you'll be able to hear that. And then we'll look at the amp. The reason why I do the pitch all the way up is because of the waveform density. So when I play it back, you can see very, very clearly the waveform representation in oscilloscope. Whereas if I put it all the way down, the waveform becomes longer and then you don't get as much clarity. So that would be impossible to draw a curve around with that. So let's put it back up to the top. Now, before we start drawing the curve, it's very important to note that the display in Kick2 isn't linear. And by that I mean, logically you would expect this whole window here is 110 milliseconds. So logically you'd expect here to be 55 milliseconds. But no, Kick2 have it weighted so that the attack represents quite a lot more of the window than the tail. So to prove that, let's look for half. So 55, we follow this window up here. So it's 0.079. If we find 55, it is all the way over there. It's here. So that is 80% of the window is only covering the first half of the kick drum. So you get a lot more granularity for the attack, and then obviously very little towards the tail, but don't be confused and just follow that accordingly. So with that said, this is our 55, this is our halfway point, and if we look at the representation here, this is our halfway point, which is essentially, well, it's starting to come down around 1/3 and then down slightly, and then it tails off around, what's that, about 80% or 85%. So let's get busy drawing that curve. Essentially, it's just a case of just drawing in around that display. So there we go. It's relatively close. You can see that there's a few sections of the route down here is a little bit, but the rest looks relatively quite good. Maybe it's a bit too long, so let's move it back a bit. Need to draw in another node. So let's take that as our amplitude curve, and then we go back to the pitch. As I said right at the start, a kick is a very fast sine from very high frequency down to the fundamental frequency. Typically, the fundamental frequency will be the key that your track is in, but because the duration is such a short amount of time, it is debatable whether you can actually have a pitched kick or not. Just ask deadmau5. So I'm not getting into that whole conversation now. Let's just try and replicate the one that we have. Now, to determine where we need to start and where we need to end, we need to look at a EQ. So let's put the oscilloscope away for now. Let's go to the original one on a EQ. So if we look at the two nodes that I've drawn in, we can see around here, A1, 55 is where it's starting to peak. That's the fundamental. And also here around 12,500 is where it really starts to tail off. So this is the start of the sine and then the sweep all the way down to the fundamental of A1. So we know that that's our window, if you like. That's our starting point and that's our end. So we need to draw them in to the curve here. So we should start around 12 and then go down to 55. One of the key elements, though, is the landing frequency towards the final part of the kick. So we need to ensure that that is as accurate as possible. Now to do that, again, we bring up oscilloscope. Let's play them back. Put them on the same spectrum. Now, so now we need to bring up oscilloscope again. And what we're trying to achieve in this part is ensuring that these waveforms line up perfectly. So as you can see, the second or third last one is quite in line, but then we start to tail away. And what that means is, because this waveform is wider than the one we're trying to replicate, we have a lower frequency here. So the narrower the waveform, the higher the frequency, and the wider the waveform, the lower the frequency. So we can automatically tell we're too low here, but we're actually quite okay here. So in this case, we're trying to focus on the last one here, or the last two, let's say. So to do that, we know we should be trying for around A1, because we saw that on the reference or on the EQ. Let's go up to A1, roughly there. So we can tell that that's, once they're moved in phase, that looks like it will be very, very close. So our initial estimate of being 55 Hertz holds. We're happy with that. Now we need to start going and plotting in the attack phase. Let's put another node here just to lock that in place. And we'll go up to the 12,500 that we saw earlier. As you can see from the representation here, it's quite a lot more densely packed, our version, than the one we're trying to replicate. So what this means is we have too many high frequencies at the start. We need to push them back a bit. So grab another node. And by doing that, by lowering the pitch, we're pushing these ones out to the right, because the waveforms get longer, remember. Let's have a look there for now. And you can see the body, now that we're starting to push this one across, it's really starting to take shape. We're still a little bit out, so we can see these ones need to be pushed back a bit. What that means is we need more low. So we're a little bit out still with the lows, so let's add another low node and push these further to the right. There we go, I think we're very, very close now. We have, so the two elements that we were trying to get at the start, we have the amplitude curve and we have the pitch curve. Amplitude, we can tell because the white and the blue are very closely aligned, and then the pitch is very much aligned also. You can notice that they're not exactly lined up. That's because Kick2 is very, very finicky. We can get more granular by zooming in and moving those nodes, but it is quite picky. That would take quite some time. So let's see the litmus test, see how close we actually are. We can do there, I guess. I'd say that's relatively close. It's not identical, as I said, because of the nodes. We need to move them a little bit further. But I would say that's very close. There you go. Hopefully that helps, and let me know how you get on recreating your kicks. Bye.